Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
The Unicorn, Part 3 by UnicornSmoke. The city built around the church. A few days and nights passed while we tried to come up with a plan. We were surviving on mostly fruit, but every couple of hours there would be an unlucky rabbit that ended up in my belly. Rabbit meat isn't bad, but it's far too gamey for me. One rabbit in particular was too quick for me to catch. It hid behind the trees and ducked in the snow. I gave chase for the better part of an hour. After 30 minutes, it was more about pride than food. I hadn't even realized how far I'd gone from the original camp until I looked into the mouth of a cave. The rabbit disappeared into the darkness. I was walking back to tell Roshan, but she already knew what I was thinking and met me halfway. If the cave was deep enough, we could have a fire and not sleep in the snow. Caves are cold, but with a fire, I thought this would be a better option, though it was a bit further from the town that I still needed to visit. I'd have to go back to the town before we could even get lost in the cave's belly. I could make my own torches, but the fire burns too quickly. The town today seems to be in celebration of something, but I'm not sure what. I never really went beyond the market area, as there was no reason to. There were more guards around the massive church than there usually was. Some of them wore armor. I've only seen one other place, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It was almost dusk, and I found myself watching in awe as hundreds of handmade paper lanterns took to the sky. The fire inside was enough to carry them into the night. It made me feel like I could reach out and grab a star. It wasn't until horns sounded that I figured out what was going on. The goosebumps that took over my skin pulled me from my daze. The orc reported back to the king a lot quicker than I thought he could. He must have guessed that we would have stopped here. Pure terror washed over my body, and in a panic I scooped up as many torches as I could hold. I didn't even think to pay for them, and I felt bad for that, but I was scared. I didn't think of flint and steel either, but that was easy to find around caves. As I ran as fast as I could, tree limbs grabbed at my hair, forcing me into a jog. I know I dropped at least one of them when I ran, my shoulder into a tree trunk. The darkness was cloaking everything around me. I stumbled and tripped a lot as my eyes adjusted to the night. Elves can see well in the dark, but it takes a few minutes for our eyes to catch up. I fell to my knees panting as I reached Roshan. She could tell something wasn't right, so she knelt down in front of me. She knew that I needed to put my arms around her. Once I caught my breath, I searched around for some flint to light a torch. I wanted to discuss what was going on in the safety of the cave. I peered in the entrance with a light. Now, but the shadow it cast swallowed up the fire. The ceiling was too low for me to ride Roshan, but it was wide enough to walk side by side. It looked like an old mine to me. There were a few support beams here and there, old torches and clothes scattered about. It was like whoever was here just before up and left. I hoped they didn't meet the same fate as the last town. I would never find out this mystery, though. There were twists and turns, but there weren't any branching paths. That was important to figure out, as it would make it easier to find the way back out. Of course, if someone knew we were here, we would be trapped. I managed to find enough supplies to make a campfire. I know I don't need to use my mouth to talk with Roshan, but I suppose it's just instinctual. We talked for a couple of hours, I think. It's hard to tell what time of day it is inside of a cave. It could have been early morning before we fell asleep. I needed to go back to the market. We were running out of food and silver to buy said food. King Quinn, however, was a pretty big obstacle. He would be able to spot me in a crowd. He was no doubt looking for both of us, and noticing a unicorn would just be as easy. Most of his royal guards knew me as well, most of whom don't like me and would be glad to put me in shackles. I was too young an elf to be trusted, which made finding work hard, so I'm more advanced in the art of stealing than most. I imagine that's not bringing Roshan to the king would be the same as stealing in their eyes. The next day crawled by as slow as clouds moved across the summer sky. There isn't much to do stuck in a cave, but I was too afraid to leave. There's nothing to make noise in here, and often that made it hard to even think. Again, I wasn't sure what time it was when I went to sleep, but my brain hurt from trying to concentrate. I needed to close my eyes for a couple of minutes or my brain would have stopped functioning altogether. My eyes flickered open a couple hours later. The floor I was laying on was cold as the cave dirt, but it wasn't dirt. I looked around with blurred vision. My eyes were always the last awake. I sat up and tried to brush the hair out of my face, but instead hit myself in the nose with the irons around my wrist. The stream of blood entered my mouth, filling it with a metallic taste. The ceiling vaulted to the stars. Golden chandeliers illuminated the room. Stained glass windows looked as blurred as my vision. Roshan was standing next to me with a chain around her neck. I used her to get to my feet, my vision coming into focus. I saw first King Quinn. I was moved and bound in my sleep yet again. I wasn't even drunk this time. Roshan's words filled my head, explaining what was going on as King Quinn bellowed. He was less than happy that I did not bring this unicorn to him like I was paid to do. He continued scolding me for a while, but I wasn't listening that closely. I do remember him saying that my punishment would be carried out in the royal courtroom. He said that so that I had a few days to think of the fate that awaited me. I already knew what he was going to do. Him and that orc were going to slaughter Roshan and force me to watch. After his tirade, we were stuck in separate rooms. It was a church, so it didn't have holding cells, but these rooms only had one way out. The rooms weren't far apart, so I could still talk to Roshan. I did my best not to speak out loud, but sometimes I slipped, though I'm sure that just made me sound like a crazy person talking to myself. Roshan told me that we were to be transferred to the king's castle in the morning. She also told me not to resist too much because there was no way that we could escape. She wanted me to rest and save my strength after Roshan got all of that out of the way. She informed me on the only way to save the land of Rhea from a frozen death. It was King Quinn's fault. From the first drop of unicorn blood, he cursed everyone to death. There was, of course, only way to get rid of the curse, which was death. King Quinn had to die. That was obvious. It was why Roshan wanted me to save my strength. That bothered me the most. She told me that the last unicorn had to die too. She wanted me to kill her. I didn't even have to think about it because I knew I wouldn't be able to do something like that. Needless to say, even though I said I would rest, I did everything but. The morning sun came quick. One of the guard captains kicked open the door to the room I was in and screamed at me to get moving. I was happy to leave this room. Churches make me anxious in the first place, and being here against my will only made it worse. We were led out of the building and to the caravan. It had been in the back of the king's carriage before, but this time was different. No one was speaking and no birds chirping. In fact, I don't remember hearing a sound other than my voice the entire first day. We were allowed to stretch our legs once we stopped, led by a 10-foot rope around our necks, of course. This did make it difficult to go to the bathroom, but I had to make do. The second day of the journey was just as eventful. It was the third day when people at least spoke to each other. They were excited that we were close to our destination and fate. Like I said, most of them wanted to see me suffer. I didn't have much longer to think of an alternative to killing Rashawn, not to mention the king as well. I wanted to kill him for everything he'd done, but that's easier to say than accomplish. So quoth this raven. Thank you once again, my darlings, for coming to see me in my little chateau. I don't get out much these days, as many of us don't. But it does mean the world to me. Why else would I be reading these stories, if not for you? Special thanks to my membership and Patreon supporters: Creepy Clown Girl, UnicornSmoke, Ermin Case, Darren and Jennifer, Laura, Mutant Artificial Intelligence, Tabby Cat, and of course, Charlotte Emerson and Cortez Williams. You guys are amazing. Have a lovely day, my darlings.